Try saying Chateau Margaux again, without butchering it like you're at some backwoods diner. Whitman sneered, his voice deliberately loud enough for nearby tables to hear. He mimicked Alana's slight accent with cruel exaggeration, drawing uncomfortable chuckles from his business associates. Alana's dark skin flushed slightly as every eye in the five-star restaurant turned toward her. The wine list trembled almost imperceptibly in her hands as Whitman continued his performance. I swear, they'll hire anyone these days. Probably can't even spell sommelier, he added, adjusting his $15,000 watch. Maybe stick to serving fried chicken, sweetheart? Mr. Han, the visiting Chinese tech billionaire, looked down at his plate, visibly uncomfortable with the racist undertones. Without a change in her professional expression, Alana turned to Mr. Han and spoke in perfect, Beijing-accented Mandarin. Sir, would you prefer I describe the wine's provincial heritage before serving? The table fell silent. Mr. Han's eyebrows shot up in surprise, while the CEO's smirk froze on his face. The 5 a.m. alarm pierced the darkness of Alana's small apartment. She silenced it quickly, careful not to wake her grandmother sleeping in the bedroom across the narrow hallway. At 28, Alana Wilson wasn't where she had planned to be. Not with a master's degree in linguistics hanging on her wall beside a faded photo of her graduation day in Beijing. She moved quietly through her morning routine, fingers tracing Chinese characters in a worn notebook while waiting for water to boil. 3 years ago, when Gran's health had deteriorated, Alana had postponed her PhD plans to care for the woman who had raised her. The academic job offers had evaporated, replaced by the steady income of restaurant work. "Morning, sunshine," her grandmother called out, appearing in her wheelchair at the doorway. Despite her fragile frame, her eyes remained sharp and knowing. "Made you some tea, Gran," Alana replied, pouring the steaming liquid into a chipped mug with Chinese symbols. "Working the dinner shift again?" Her grandmother's fingers, swollen with arthritis, wrapped around the warm cup. Alana nodded, tucking a linguistics journal into her bag. "Mr. Peterson scheduled me for the VIP section tonight. Better tips." She didn't mention the casual slights, the assumptions, or how customers rarely looked her in the eye when ordering. "You know what my mother always said," her grandmother offered, a familiar refrain between them. "Education is a treasure no one can steal." Alana smiled, kissing the older woman's forehead. "And I've got a fortune in my head. Just need someone to notice the investment potential." She straightened her server's uniform, feeling the weight of two worlds colliding, the scholar and the server, as she headed for the door. The ivory room gleamed under soft chandelier light, a monument to exclusivity in downtown's financial district. White tablecloths stretched across each table like fresh snowfall, undisturbed until the evening's wealthy patrons would arrive to claim their territory. Alana moved silently through the back entrance, nodding to Jorge, the dishwasher who had been there for 20 years. The kitchen buzzed with pre-service energy, chefs barking orders, the rhythmic chopping of vegetables, pans sizzling on industrial stoves. "Wilson, you're on tables 12 through 15 tonight. Chinese delegation with Whitman Enterprises." Manager Peterson's voice cut through the kitchen noise as he approached, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the tile floor. He was a thin man with perpetually worried eyes, more concerned with pleasing the owner than the customers. "These are 8-figure clients. Don't mess it up." "Yes, sir," Alana replied, tucking her textbook deeper into her locker. Peterson caught the movement. "And none of that, whatever it is you read, this isn't a library." He gestured vaguely at her bag. "Remember, your background music here, present but unnoticed unless needed." Across the room, Chad, a white server with half her experience, was being briefed on wine pairings for the evening. "The sommelier specifically requested you for the Thompson party," Peterson told him with a smile. "They appreciate your knowledge." Alana bit her tongue. Last week she had corrected Chad's pronunciation of Gewürztraminer, only to be told to stick to the basics. "The Whitman party might ask about the wine, just bring me over if they have questions," Peterson instructed her, already walking away. And Alana? Tone down the southern thing. These are sophisticated people. She watched him leave, then straightened the plates on her serving tray with mathematical precision. She had memorized the entire wine list, including vintage variations and regional characteristics in both English and Mandarin. Not that anyone had asked. The invisible barriers of the restaurant were clearer than the crystal glassware they served. Some people belonged in the spotlight, others in the shadows. The pre-dinner lull offered a rare 15 minutes of calm. While other servers scrolled through their phones or smoked outside, Alana claimed the small corner table in the break room. She extracted her weathered copy of Advanced Business Mandarin from her bag, fingers finding the dog-eared page marked with yesterday's receipt. Chinese characters flowed across the page, a visual poetry she'd loved since her undergraduate days. Alana traced them with her fingertip, mouthing complex phrases about international trade negotiations. In another life, she would be using these words in boardrooms, not memorizing them between serving shifts. Wo xiang tichu yixie guanyu jexie tiaoquan de yuan, she whispered, practicing how to raise concerns about contract terms. Her pronunciation was flawless, a skill honed through 3 years studying in Beijing before Gran's health had called her home. Footsteps approached. In one fluid motion, Alana slid the textbook beneath a stack of menus and picked up her order pad, appearing to review tonight's specials. Peterson appeared in the doorway. Whitman's party just called. They're coming 30 minutes early. His eyes narrowed at her table. What are you doing? Memorizing the chef's specials, she replied, holding up the pad. He seemed satisfied with the answer. Good. And remember, these Chinese businessmen are important. Smile, nod, don't try to join the conversation. Of course. After he left, Alana retrieved her book, running her fingers over a Chinese proverb in the margin. The gem cannot be polished without friction, nor man perfected without trials. She closed the book and tucked it away. Tonight would be just another performance as the invisible server, a role that had never quite fit, but one she'd learned to play perfectly. The restaurant's grand entrance doors swung open at precisely 6:45 p.m. First came the security detail, 2 stone-faced men in dark suits who scanned the room with practiced efficiency. They were followed by a cluster of assistants carrying sleek tablets and leather portfolios. Then Mr. Han entered. Unlike the ostentatious American executives Alana usually served, Han Jin moved with understated confidence. His charcoal suit was expertly tailored, but not flashy. His only visible luxury, a simple platinum watch that caught the light as he removed his coat. At 50-something, his salt and pepper hair framed a face marked by intelligence rather than arrogance. The Chinese tech billionaire was known for transforming a small Beijing startup into a global AI powerhouse. Alana observed all this while arranging water glasses at their reserved table. She recognized him from business journals she'd studied, along with 2 other executives from Han Innovation's international expansion team. Mr. Han and his team have arrived, the hostess announced to Peterson, who immediately abandoned the staff he was briefing to greet the party. Welcome to the Ivory Room. We're honored to have you. Peterson's voice rose half an octave. His normal sternness dissolved into deference. Alana noticed one of Han's associates whispering something about the custom tea service they had requested. Peterson nodded enthusiastically despite the confusion in his eyes. Wilson, he hissed as he passed her. Get the special tea set from storage. The Chinese delegation wants their own tea. As she moved to comply, Alana heard the front doors open again. Richard Whitman had arrived, the CEO hosting tonight's dinner and notorious for his treatment of service staff. The evening's players were assembled. The stage was set. Richard Whitman's entrance commanded attention, exactly as he intended it. The CEO of Whitman Enterprises stood 6'2" with perfectly coiffed silver hair and a tan that suggested recent time on a private beach. His handmade Italian suit probably cost more than Alana's annual rent. Jin, there you are! Whitman's voice boomed across the restaurant as he approached the Chinese delegation with arms outstretched. Hope you haven't been waiting long. Mr. Han offered a polite bow. We just arrived, Mr. Whitman. Richard, please, Whitman corrected, clapping Han on the shoulder with forced familiarity. We're going to be partners after all. He guided the group toward their table, barely acknowledging Peterson's presence with a curt nod. Alana returned with the special tea set just as everyone was being seated. She arranged it carefully on the side table, aware of Mr. Han's approving glance. "Oh, we won't be needing that," Whitman waved dismissively at the tea. "Bring us your best scotch. The Macallan 25, if you have it." "But Mr. Han specifically requested," Peterson began. "Trust me," Whitman interrupted with a wink to Han. "American deals are sealed with good whiskey, not tea. Isn't that right?" Han's expression remained neutral, but Alana caught the brief flash of disappointment in his eyes. As Alana poured water for the table, Whitman barely glanced her way. She moved efficiently, invisible yet present, as her job required. "Y'all will find tonight's special is a pan-seared halibut," she explained, her soft southern accent slightly more pronounced under pressure. "It's served with a fennel and citrus salad and a saffron-infused beurre blanc." "I'll have the filet medium rare," Whitman interrupted, not letting her finish. He turned to Han with a smirk. "Don't worry if you didn't catch all that. Our local servers have their own unique way of speaking." Alana maintained her professional smile, though her fingers tightened around the water pitcher. "What was that you said? Y'all will find?" Whitman continued, mimicking her accent with exaggerated slowness, drawing out each syllable. "I sometimes need a translator myself." He laughed, looking around the table expectantly. The Chinese delegation shifted uncomfortably. One of Han's associates forced a polite smile, while Han himself remained impassive, studying Alana with quiet intensity. "Now imagine trying to explain complex technical specifications," Whitman pressed on, seemingly oblivious to the tension. "No offense to our charming waitress here, but some people are better suited to certain roles. Speaking of which," he transitioned smoothly into business talk, effectively dismissing Alana from the conversation. As she stepped away, she heard him lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Between us, Jin, I've found it's best to keep expectations simple with certain types. The language barrier with your team is challenge enough without adding local dialect to the mix." Alana disappeared into the kitchen, her cheeks burning not with embarrassment, but with a simmering anger she rarely allowed herself to feel. In the kitchen's controlled chaos, Alana found a moment of solitude by the service station. Her hand trembled slightly as she arranged bread rolls in a basket, the familiar rhythm usually calming her frayed nerves. Not tonight. 20 minutes into service, and Whitman had already reduced her to a punchline, a caricature with an accent but no substance. She'd experienced this before, but something about tonight felt different. Perhaps it was seeing the quiet dignity of Mr. Han contrasted against Whitman's arrogance, or perhaps it was simply reaching her breaking point. "You okay?" Jorge asked, pausing with a stack of clean plates. "That guy at table 14 is a real pendejo." "I'm fine," she replied automatically. The restaurant mantra: always fine, always smiling, always accommodating. But was she? Gran's voice echoed in her mind. "You weren't raised to swallow disrespect, Alana Marie. Your mama would have never stood for it, and neither should you." Her mother, brilliant, fierce, gone too soon, had indeed never tolerated such treatment. But she also hadn't faced the practical realities Alana now juggled. Gran's medical bills, rent increases, student loans still unpaid. Alana glanced at her reflection in the polished serving tray. The woman staring back had spent years dimming her light, speaking more softly, nodding more readily. For what? Security that felt increasingly like a cage. "Order up for 14. The chef's call yanked her back to reality. As she arranged the appetizers on her tray, Alana calculated the cost of dignity. One wrong move could mean unemployment. No references. No health insurance for Gran. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders, heavier than any serving tray. Would speaking up even matter? She wondered, straightening her uniform. Would anyone even listen? She had no answer as she pushed through the kitchen doors, perfectly balanced tray in hand, practiced smile firmly in place. But something had shifted inside her, a quiet rebellion taking root, waiting for the right moment to break through the surface. Alana approached table 14 with the first course, her movements fluid and unobtrusive. The conversation halted momentarily as she set down delicate plates of tuna tartare and scallop ceviche. "Perfect timing," Whitman declared. "We were just getting to the interesting part." She nodded politely and stepped back to the side station, appearing busy with folding napkins while remaining within earshot. Years of being treated as furniture had taught her that people spoke freely around those they considered invisible. Whitman leaned forward, lowering his voice to what he clearly thought was a confidential level. "Now, about the licensing terms we discussed earlier, I've had legal make some minor adjustments to Section 5.3. One of Han's associates said something in Mandarin, his tone questioning. "He is asking about the intellectual property provisions," the company's translator explained, a young man whose formal Mandarin betrayed his textbook learning. "Nothing major," Whitman assured them with a wave of his hand. "Standard language protecting both parties. The translation you received covers the basics." Alana's ears perked up. Something in Whitman's tone triggered her instincts. As she refreshed water glasses, she caught fragments of Mandarin between Han and his team. They were concerned about technology transfer requirements, but struggling to articulate specific questions through their translator, whose vocabulary seemed limited to general business terms. "Women shu yao geng ming que de tiaokuan," Han said, clearly dissatisfied with the explanation. "They want more clear terms," the translator offered hesitantly. "It's all standard," Whitman repeated, sliding over a document. "Industry boilerplate. Look, I know these negotiations can get tedious with the back-and-forth translations. Why don't we focus on the big picture tonight?" What Alana heard next made her freeze mid-pour. "Between us," Whitman continued to his American colleague in a near whisper, "they'll never notice the territorial exclusivity clause buried in the appendix. By the time their legal team catches it, we'll have their core algorithm integrated into our systems." Alana carefully set down the water pitcher, her mind racing. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was deliberate deception. The weight of what she'd overheard pressed on Alana's chest as she retreated to the kitchen. Whitman wasn't just being condescending. He was actively exploiting the language barrier to mislead Mr. Han's company. The minor adjustments would essentially grant Whitman Enterprises unrestricted use of Han Innovation's proprietary technology while limiting their access to international markets. Alana paced by the dessert station, her thoughts colliding like storm clouds. This was wrong, clearly wrong. But what could she do? What should she do? The sensible answer was nothing. Stay quiet. Keep her head down. This wasn't her business deal or her problem. She was here to serve food, collect tips, and go home to Gran. But the scholar in her, the woman who had once dreamed of building bridges between languages and cultures, couldn't ignore the deliberate miscommunication happening before her eyes. "Wilson, where's the Bordeaux for table 14? Peterson's sharp voice cut through her thoughts. "Coming right up," she answered automatically, moving to the wine cellar. As she carefully decanted the expensive red wine, Alana considered her options. She could pass a note to Mr. Han, but that would be immediately suspicious. She could try speaking to him privately, but when would she get the chance? And even if she did, why would he believe a server over a potential business partner? The main course would be served soon. After that, contracts would be discussed in earnest. The window of opportunity was closing fast. Alana's hands stilled on the wine bottle. There was a third option, one that would irrevocably change the trajectory of this evening and possibly her life. She could speak up directly, in Mandarin, revealing both her linguistic abilities and Whitman's deception in one shocking moment. Her grandmother's words echoed again. "Education is a treasure no one can steal." Perhaps it was time to reveal just how valuable that treasure was. Balancing the wine tray with steady hands but a racing heart, Alana pushed through the kitchen doors. By the time she reached table 14, her decision was made. The main course arrived with theatrical precision, servers appearing simultaneously with steaming plates as Alana approached with the decanted wine. Conversation at table 14 had shifted to technological specifications, with Whitman dominating and the translator struggling to keep pace. "Before the next round of signatures, I've prepared a summary of key points," Whitman announced, sliding documents across the table. "Just the highlights, nothing your team hasn't already reviewed." Mr. Hahn accepted the papers with a polite nod, though his expression revealed lingering uncertainty. His associate whispered something in Mandarin about the territorial restrictions they'd discussed earlier. "Nothing to worry about," Whitman assured them, misrepresenting the whispered concern. "Standard procedure." Alana positioned herself at Mr. T, Hahn's right shoulder, beginning to pour the Bordeaux into his glass. The ruby liquid caught the light as it flowed, matching the color rising in her cheeks. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she completed the pour, and instead of moving to the next guest, remained standing beside him. "Excuse me, Mr. Hahn," she said in perfect, academically precise Mandarin. "I believe there may be a misunderstanding regarding the appendix clauses in the contract." The table fell silent. Even the clink of silverware in the restaurant seemed to pause. Hahn turned slowly to face her, astonishment evident in his widened eyes. Continuing in flawless Mandarin, Alana spoke clearly and respectfully. "The document references exclusive territorial rights that would prevent Hahn Innovations from operating independently in European and South American markets without Whitman Enterprises' approval. This differs significantly from the terms you were discussing earlier." She maintained perfect composure, though she could feel Peterson's horrified stare from across the room. Whitman's face had transformed from confident to confused to furious in the span of seconds. Mr. Hahn studied her face intently before responding in Mandarin. "You speak with remarkable fluency. Please continue." "Additionally," she said, setting down the wine bottle with steady hands, "the intellectual property provisions extend beyond joint development to include pre-existing technologies, essentially granting unrestricted access to your company's core algorithms." The power at the table had suddenly, irrevocably shifted. For 3 breathless seconds, no one moved. The restaurant's ambient noise seemed distant, as if Alana and the table existed in their own pocket of suspended time. Whitman recovered first, his business smile straining at the edges. "I don't know what she's saying, but I assure you—" "She is saying," Mr. Hahn interrupted in measured English, "that your contract contains terms significantly different from what you have verbally described." His gaze never left Alana's face. "Terms that would be highly unfavorable to my company." Whitman's complexion shifted from healthy tan to mottled red. "This is completely inappropriate, Peterson!" he called out, searching for the manager. Peterson materialized instantly, practically jogging to the table. "Sir, I am so sorry for this intrusion. Alana will be removed immediately." "No." Mr. Hahn's single word carried quiet authority. "She will stay." Whitman leaned forward, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper. "Jin, this is absurd. You can't possibly take the word of a linguistics scholar who speaks Mandarin more fluently than your translator," Hahn finished, switching back to Mandarin to address Alana. "Where did you study?" "Beijing Normal University, sir. I completed my master's there 3 years ago," she replied, maintaining her professional composure despite the electric tension surrounding her. Hahn nodded appreciatively before turning to Whitman. "I prefer to continue our discussion with Alana present to ensure accurate communication." Whitman's fingers drummed against the tablecloth, his expression calculating behind the mask of affability. Peterson hovered uncertainly nearby, torn between customer service protocols and the unprecedented situation unfolding. The delicate power balance of the evening had been completely upended, leaving everyone, except perhaps Mr. Hahn, struggling to find their footing in this new reality. "This is highly irregular," Whitman protested, his voice strained with forced cordiality. "Our companies have professional translators for these matters." Mr. Hahn turned to his own translator, a young man who now looked profoundly uncomfortable. They exchanged brief words in Mandarin. "With respect," the translator said, bowing slightly, "I acknowledge that my business vocabulary is limited. I was hired primarily for general communication." Han nodded, then addressed the table. "I believe we would benefit from precision at this stage of our negotiations." He gestured to the empty chair between himself and his chief financial officer. "Alana, would you join us?" The invitation hung in the air like a challenge. Alana felt the weight of every eye in the restaurant, servers pausing mid-step, Peterson's horrified stare, Whitman's barely contained fury. "Sir, company policy strictly prohibits staff from—" Peterson began. "I'll gladly pay for her time," Han interrupted smoothly. "Consider it a consulting fee for specialized language services." "I'm not sure," Peterson stammered. $10,000, Han stated calmly, "for the remainder of the evening, paid directly to your restaurant." The sum silenced Peterson instantly. Even Whitman's objections faltered. Alana carefully set down her serving tray, removed her apron, and handed both to a slack-jawed Peterson. With quiet dignity, she took the offered seat, back straight, hands folded professionally on the table. "Thank you, Mr. Han," she said in English, then switched to Mandarin. "I'm happy to facilitate clear communication between both parties." Han smiled, the first genuine smile of the evening. "Excellent. Now perhaps we should review these documents from the beginning, with proper translation of all terms." Whitman's face performed a remarkable transformation, shifting from outrage to calculation to practiced affability in seconds. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Transparency is key in any partnership." Across the restaurant, servers whispered behind cupped hands. Chad stared open-mouthed at his colleague's astonishing elevation. And in that moment, Alana felt the invisible barriers she'd lived behind for years begin to crumble. She was no longer background music. She had become part of the symphony. "If you'll excuse us for a moment," Whitman said with practiced charm, "I'd like a brief word with our unexpected translator." He gestured toward the hallway leading to the private dining rooms. Mr. Han nodded, already engrossed in reviewing the contract with his team. Alana rose gracefully, maintaining her professional composure as she followed Whitman from the table. The moment they rounded the corner, out of sight from the main dining room, Whitman's demeanor transformed. He turned on her, stepping uncomfortably close. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" he hissed, voice low but venomous. His expensive cologne couldn't quite mask the sour smell of anger. Alana stood her ground. "Providing accurate translation services, sir." "Don't play smart with me." Whitman's finger jabbed the air inches from her face. "You've deliberately interfered in a private business matter. Do you have any idea who I am? What I could do to your career, such as it is?" The threat hung between them, but Alana found herself surprisingly steady. "I understand exactly who you are, Mr. Whitman, and what you were attempting to do." His eyes narrowed. "You're making serious accusations. I could sue you for defamation, or worse, make sure you never work in this city again. One call from me, and Peterson will fire you before dessert is served." For a brief moment, fear flickered through her. The practical concerns of bills, Grand's medication, rent due next week. But it was quickly replaced by something stronger, the certainty that she was finally standing in her truth. "Is there a problem?" Mr. Han's voice came from behind them. He had approached silently, watching the exchange with keen eyes. Whitman immediately stepped back, his businessman's smile reattaching itself. "Not at all. Just clarifying some points with your translator." "Good," Han replied, though his expression suggested he understood exactly what had been happening. "Because we have important matters to discuss, and I would prefer Alana's assistance in ensuring nothing gets lost in translation." As they returned to the table, Alana could feel Whitman's eyes burning into her back, promising this wasn't over. Back at the table, The atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Where there had been casual business banter, now there was focused attention on the documents spread before them. Han's team had rearranged themselves, legal counsel now positioned prominently, digital tablets open to reference materials. "Let's address Section 5.3 directly," Han said, tapping the document. "Alana, would you please translate this section precisely?" She leaned forward, scanning the dense legal text. The clause was cleverly worded, with implications buried in technical jargon. This states that all derivative technologies developed during the partnership would be jointly owned, but defines derivative to include any system that incorporates or interfaces with Han Innovation's existing algorithms, Alana explained in clear Mandarin. Han's legal counsel frowned. That would effectively classify our core AI engine as derivative, once integrated with Whitman's systems. Whitman maintained his professional smile. "Standard industry language to protect both parties. Our legal team assures me this is boilerplate." "Curious definition of standard," Han replied coolly. "Alana, please explain to Mr. Whitman our concern in precise English." As Alana translated the technical objection, she noticed Whitman's expression hardening. He was losing control of the narrative and the deal. "Perhaps we could compromise," Whitman suggested, sliding over an alternative document. "We've prepared several options." The new proposal contained equally problematic terms, just hidden differently. When Alana translated these accurately, the tension at the table intensified. "Mr. Whitman," Han said finally, "I'm beginning to question whether we share the same understanding of partnership." Whitman's knuckles whitened around his pen. "Business is business, Jin. Everyone seeks advantages. Surely in China—" "Careful," Han warned, his voice still pleasant but eyes sharp. "Cultural stereotypes rarely improve negotiations." The delicate diplomacy was unraveling. Han's team exchanged concerned glances. One began typing rapidly on his phone. Whitman's colleague whispered urgently in his ear. Alana found herself at the epicenter of a business relationship imploding in real time. The evening teetered on a knife's edge, million-dollar deals and careers hanging in the balance, including, potentially, her own. The atmosphere around the table had chilled to Arctic levels. Han's chief financial officer was now speaking rapidly in Mandarin about walking away from the deal entirely. Whitman's colleague was calculating potential losses on his phone beneath the table. The partnership was disintegrating before their eyes. Alana observed the subtle cultural currents flowing beneath the conflict. Years of academic study had taught her that negotiations weren't just about language. They were about cultural frameworks and saving face. "Mr. Han," she said quietly in Mandarin, "may I offer an observation?" He nodded, curiosity momentarily overriding frustration. In American business culture, aggressive negotiation tactics are often considered standard practice, pushing boundaries to see where the other party draws the line. She chose her words carefully. It's not necessarily seen as disrespectful, but rather as expected business strategy. Han considered this, then responded in Mandarin. And in Chinese business culture, trust and mutual respect precede contractual details. Without one, the other has little value. Alana turned to Whitman, switching to English. "Mr. Han understands competitive negotiation, but his concern goes beyond specific terms. The approach itself has created trust issues that threaten the foundation of any partnership." Whitman's eyes narrowed, but something in his expression shifted. For the first time that evening, he seemed to truly listen. "Mr. Whitman," Alana continued, drawing on her academic training in cross-cultural communication, "in Chinese business culture, the concept of guangxi, relationship building, is fundamental. Contracts follow trust, not the other way around." A moment of silence fell over the table as Whitman processed this. "What would you suggest?" he finally asked, addressing Alana directly for the first time. "Perhaps starting with shared principles rather than specific terms," she offered. "Establishing mutual understanding of what partnership means to both companies before addressing contractual language." Han nodded approvingly. A wise approach. Whitman studied Han's face, then made a decision. He pushed the controversial documents aside and placed a blank notepad in the center of the table. "Let's start fresh," he said. "No hidden clauses, no aggressive tactics. What principles would make this partnership valuable to Han Innovations?" The negotiation had found new life, with Alana as its unexpected heart. As the conversation shifted to core principles, Alana's role transformed from mere translator to cultural bridge. She navigated the complex linguistic terrain with remarkable precision, moving seamlessly between languages while capturing nuance, technical details, and cultural context. When Han described his company's AI architecture using specialized Mandarin terminology, Alana didn't just translate the words. She rendered the concepts in technically precise English that Whitman's team could immediately grasp. "The neural pathway architecture he's describing is similar to your quantum processing system," she explained to Whitman, "but with a fundamental difference in how it handles uncertainty variables." When legal terms arose with no direct Mandarin equivalent, she provided contextual explanations rather than word-for-word translations, ensuring true comprehension on both sides. The discussion grew increasingly technical, touching on algorithm parameters, machine learning protocols, and proprietary systems. Yet Alana never hesitated, drawing on her academic background to maintain the flow of communication. Han's team began directing complex questions to her, trusting her to convey not just their words, but their intentions. Whitman's technical officers stopped waiting for translations, instead watching Alana's face as she spoke, recognizing the value of her insights. "Ask them about the latency issues in distributed networks," Whitman requested, now addressing her directly rather than speaking through her. As the discussion progressed, even Peterson, hovering anxiously nearby, couldn't help but look impressed. The server he had instructed to tone down the Southern thing was now guiding a multi-million-dollar negotiation with confidence and expertise. Alana felt a quiet satisfaction as she continued to translate. This was what she had trained for, not just converting words from one language to another, but truly connecting minds across cultural and linguistic divides. As the waitstaff cleared the main course dishes, the conversation shifted to a more relaxed tone. The initial business framework had been established, with both parties finding common ground that hadn't seemed possible an hour earlier. "I'm curious," Mr. Han said, turning to Alana during the natural pause before dessert. "Your Mandarin is exceptional. Academic level, but with Beijing colloquialisms. Where did you study?" "Beijing Normal University," she replied. "I completed my master's in comparative linguistics there 3 years ago, with a focus on business communication between Eastern and Western languages." Whitman, who had been checking his phone, looked up with sudden interest. "Before that, I did my undergraduate work at Georgetown," Alana continued, "double majoring in Chinese language and international business." "Impressive credentials," Han remarked. "How did you end up—" He gestured discreetly to the restaurant around them. Alana took a sip of water, composing her thoughts. This wasn't a story she shared often. "I was accepted to a PhD program," she explained. "My dissertation was going to explore how language shapes international business negotiations." Ironically enough, a small smile touched her lips. "But my grandmother who raised me had a stroke. She needed full-time care and I was her only family. So I postponed academia and found work that offered health insurance and flexible hours." Han nodded thoughtfully. "Family responsibility is a core value in Chinese culture. Your grandmother must be very proud." "She reminds me daily that education is a treasure no one can steal," Alana said, the familiar phrase warming her despite the formal setting. "And do you speak other languages with such fluency?" Han inquired. "French and Spanish professionally, enough Japanese to get by. I was studying Korean before." She trailed off, gesturing to indicate her current circumstances. Whitman was watching her with new eyes, calculating, assessing, as if seeing a valuable asset he had previously overlooked. 3 years serving CEOs their dinner, he mused aloud. while speaking more languages than most of my international team combined. Yes, sir, Alana replied simply. Would you like to see the dessert menu? The dessert plates had been cleared, espresso served in delicate cups. Outside the restaurant windows, city lights sparkled against the darkened sky. 3 hours had passed since Alana had first spoken Mandarin at the table, 3 hours that had completely transformed the trajectory of the evening. I believe we have the framework for something valuable, Han said, reviewing the handwritten principles they had established. My legal team will draft new documents reflecting these terms. Whitman nodded, his earlier aggression replaced by genuine engagement. I'll have our people remove the problematic clauses. Clean slate as agreed. The two CEOs exchanged looks of cautious respect. Not quite friendship, but a foundation of understanding that hadn't existed before. We'll finalize everything at tomorrow's meeting, Han continued. 9 a.m. at your offices? Looking forward to it, Whitman confirmed, then hesitated. Would it be possible? He glanced at Alana. That is, would you be willing to join us tomorrow as well, to ensure continued clarity? Before Alana could respond, Han interjected smoothly. I was about to suggest the same. Your expertise has been invaluable. The realization of what was happening washed over Alana. She was being invited into a corporate boardroom, not to serve coffee, but to facilitate a multi-million-dollar international deal. I would be honored, she said, maintaining her professional composure despite the emotions swirling beneath the surface. As the executives stood to leave, Han offered his hand to Alana, a gesture of respect between equals. Thank you for your exceptional service tonight. You've changed the course of this partnership for the better. Whitman extended his hand as well, his expression suggesting he was still processing the evening's unexpected developments. Indeed, it seems I've been underestimating the talent right in front of me. The following morning found Alana in the Whitman Enterprises lobby, dressed in her best interview suit, a navy ensemble she hadn't worn since her last academic conference 3 years ago. She had called in sick to the restaurant, something she'd never done before, and spent hours briefing her grandmother on the extraordinary events of the previous evening. The executive conference room overlooked the city from 40 stories up. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a view that made the world below seem small and distant. Han and his team were already seated when she arrived, with Whitman and his executives entering moments later. The meeting proceeded with surprising efficiency, the previous night's foundation enabling quick resolution of remaining details. Alana provided translation when needed, though both sides now made efforts to communicate more directly, with greater patience and respect. As the final documents were being prepared for signatures, Han turned to her. Alana, I'd like to discuss your future, he said in English, ensuring everyone present could understand. Han Innovations is expanding our North American operations. We need someone who understands both Chinese and American business cultures, someone who can build bridges rather than walls. He slid a folder across the table. I'd like to offer you a position as our International Communications Director. The role includes overseeing our cross-cultural business development team and serving as liaison for key partnerships like this one. Alana opened the folder. The compensation package inside, complete with healthcare benefits, relocation allowance, and 6-figure salary, represented everything she had worked toward before life had intervened. The position would begin immediately, Han continued, and includes flexible arrangements to accommodate your family responsibilities. For once, Alana found herself at a loss for words in any language. Actually, Whitman interjected, clearing his throat, Whitman Enterprises would like to make a counteroffer. All eyes turned to him. The room fell silent, tension returning to the carefully balanced atmosphere. We also have need for someone with Alana's unique capabilities, he continued. Our international division has been searching for a cultural integration specialist for months. Han raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Whitman shifted uncomfortably in his chair before continuing. Before that happens, however, I owe you an apology, Alana. The words seemed to cost him considerable effort. Richard Whitman was not a man accustomed to admitting fault. My behavior last night was inappropriate and unprofessional. I made assumptions based on nothing of substance. I judged your capabilities by your uniform rather than your character. He straightened his tie, a nervous gesture at odds with his usual confidence. In business, that kind of mistake costs money. In life, it costs something more valuable. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present, least of all Alana. The man who had mockingly said, "Try saying that," while imitating her accent, was now struggling to find the right words himself. "So," he finished awkwardly, "I hope you'll consider our offer as well, though I'd understand completely if you didn't." That evening, Alana returned to the ivory room, not as a server, but as a guest. She had called Peterson earlier, explaining she wouldn't be coming back. His sputtered protests died quickly when she mentioned her new position at Han Innovations. "I'd like to treat my former colleagues to dinner," she told the hostess, who didn't recognize her in her business attire. "The kitchen and waitstaff, after their shift ends." Walking through the restaurant as a customer created a surreal sense of displacement. Tables she had served for years now looked different from this side of the experience. Jorge spotted her first, nearly dropping a stack of plates. "Alana, what are you doing here?" Soon she was surrounded by her former co-workers, their faces reflecting a mixture of confusion, curiosity, and growing excitement as the story of the previous night spread in whispered conversations. Peterson approached cautiously, his usual authoritative demeanor noticeably subdued. Ms. Wilson, I didn't expect to see you again." "I wanted to say goodbye properly," she replied, "and to thank everyone." When the restaurant finally closed, the staff gathered around tables they normally only served. Over food they usually only presented, Alana shared her news. "You're really leaving us for a corporate job?" Chad asked, his earlier jealousy giving way to genuine surprise. "Not just any job," Maria, the hostess, corrected him. "She's going to be a director, with an office and everything." As congratulations flowed, Alana noticed how differently her colleagues now looked at her, not with envy, but with possibility. If invisible barriers could fall for her, perhaps they could fall for others too. "To Alana," Jorge proposed, raising his glass, "who reminded us all to never judge a book by its cover, or a person by their uniform." 1 month later, Alana stood at the window of her new office, watching the city transition from day to night. Her workspace reflected her rapidly evolving life. Diplomas now proudly displayed instead of hidden in storage, a small jade plant from Mr. Han beside her computer, and a photo of her grandmother in a silver frame. The past 4 weeks had unfolded like a dream. Her first paycheck had covered Grand's medical bills with money to spare. They had moved to a ground-floor apartment in a building with accessibility features, eliminating the daily struggle with stairs. Most importantly, Alana had arranged for part-time home care, allowing her grandmother dignity and independence while she worked. Her phone chimed with a calendar reminder. Mentoring session, 6 p.m. Downstairs in the company cafe waited 3 recent graduates, all from backgrounds similar to hers, all brilliant, all overlooked by traditional corporate recruitment. Part of Alana's new role included identifying overlooked talent and creating pathways into the organization. As she gathered her materials for the session, Alana thought about the night that had changed everything. One moment of courage, of standing in her truth despite the risks, had unlocked the future she had once thought lost forever. Sometimes the most important step was simply refusing to remain invisible. The quarterly leadership summit brought Alana face-to-face with both Han and Whitman. Their company's partnership had flourished, with Alana's team bridging communication gaps that would have previously derailed progress. After the formal presentations, Han approached her with a rare smile. "Your grandmother is well?" "Much better, thank you," Alana replied. "The new treatments are helping." Whitman joined them, noticeably more respectful than during their first encounter. "Your team's cultural integration framework has increased our international division's efficiency by 30%. Impressive work. Thank you, sir, she said. We're just getting started. As the executives moved on to other conversations, a young server approached with a tray of drinks. Alana noticed how the executive's eyes slid past him as if he were invisible, just as they once had with her. Thank you, she said, making deliberate eye contact as she took a glass. I appreciate your attention to detail. The young man's surprised smile reminded her of herself not long ago. Later, as she addressed the closing session, Alana shared the philosophy that now guided her work. Talent speaks all languages. Wise leaders listen. The most valuable assets in any organization are often hiding in plain sight, not because they're trying to be invisible, but because others have failed to truly see them. If this story resonated with you, remember that everyone has hidden talents waiting to be recognized, perhaps even you. Who in your life might you be underestimating? Who might be underestimating you? Don't let powerful stories like Alana's remain invisible. Subscribe to Beat Stories now and hit that like button to help us reach more people who need to hear this message. New inspirational true stories every week that challenge perspectives and celebrate hidden potential. Join our community where we recognize that everyone has a story worth telling, including you. Beat Stories. Because the most powerful narratives are the ones that change how we see the world and ourselves.
You just witnessed the gap between power and responsibility. At Beat Stories, we close that gap, one story at a time. Subscribe and help hold systems, leaders, and gatekeepers accountable.